I'm Dr. Mark Fulkerson, Chief Professional Engineer with the Southwest Florida Water Management District, and we're here near the lower end of the Withlacoochee River, near where it discharges into the Gulf. And this river originates in the middle of central Florida in an area called the Green Swamp, and it meanders about 160 miles through 8 different Florida counties before discharging into the Gulf. And we're looking at a map here. This is an old 1944 image of the lower portion of the Withlacoochee River. Right here on the right-hand side of the map is where the river discharges into the Gulf. And back in the late 1800s, actually the 1890s, when phosphate was discovered near the town of Denellen, this river was the means to be able to commercially get that phosphate out and to the Gulf and sent places. So they actually deepened and dredged the entire river here all the way from the Gulf up through what is now Lake Rousseau and then onward towards Denellen. And about that time, they constructed the original lock and dam here near the town of Inglis. And this original lock and dam was constructed so it could harness hydroelectric power. It could actually take advantage of this newly formed lake, which is Lake Rousseau, and the fact that it dropped, dozens of feet before it flowed out into the Gulf. And so because of that water level difference, they had a hydroelectric plant there, and they used that to generate electricity to use in the mining operations up in Denellen. And they also had an old lock here, a boat lock, and that's where the barges would come in and out from the Gulf up to Denellen. And so they would actually transport that phosphate via barge through this structure, be able to get it down to the old original Withlacoochee River channel, and then they took that all the way out into the Gulf and sent it to where it went. If we fast forward a handful of decades, we come to about 1960, and in 1960 there was another purpose for this area of the river, and it was going to serve as a portion of the Cross Florida Barge Canal. And that barge canal was an idea to be able to build a canal all the way across the state of Florida to get boats basically from the Gulf to the Atlantic much quicker than having to go all the way down south and then back up around the end of Florida. And so when they had the ideas to do that, they actually dug a canal from the Gulf directly into Lake Rousseau. And you can see in this 2017 image what that canal looks like now. They dug it into Lake Rousseau, and they were going to continue it across the state of Florida. They actually only constructed it in certain parts, but where they constructed it here, in this part of Florida, they actually bisected the Withlacoochee River, and you can see how they cut the old river channel that came out of Lake Rousseau past that original lock and dam, and they bisected it. So now any water flowing out of that end of Lake Rousseau is just going to hit the barge canal and go directly out to the Gulf. It wouldn't be able anymore to carry down the remainder of this section of the Withlacoochee River. And when they did that, they also installed some new locks. These new locks were then how boats were going to be able to navigate from Lake Rousseau to the Gulf, and they actually had plans to build several other lock locations all the way across the state of Florida with this canal. They weren't all constructed, but this one was. And then by the end of the 60s into 1970, they kind of realized after the fact, wow, we've cut off that old river channel. The water that's coming down the rest of the Withlacoochee from the Green Swamp all the way past those 8 counties can no longer make its way down that final several miles of the lower Withlacoochee River. And so what they did was they had to construct a bypass channel, and we're going to look at that on this next map. All right, so we're currently here at the Inglis Bypass Spillway, and this is the primary discharge structure to release water from Lake Rousseau, and that water flows to the lower Withlacoochee River. And really, whatever is flowing into Lake Rousseau from the upper Withlacoochee River, we let out through this structure, and it flows down the lower Withlacoochee River. And you can see that water coming into the old barge canal. It goes down this bypass channel, and then it flows over the bypass spillway. And this bypass spillway handles all the water that's flowing into Lake Rousseau up to a certain point. It has a maximum capacity of about 1,400 cubic feet per second. That's about 900 million gallons a day. And most of the time, that's all that's flowing down the Withlacoochee River. Most of the time, it's less than that. So under most circumstances, this structure handles all the water that's flowing into Lake Rousseau, and it's able to discharge it out down the Lower Withlacoochee River. There are instances, however, when we get more flow than 1,400 cubic feet per second in the Withlacoochee River coming into Lake Rousseau. And when that occurs, when this bypass spillway reaches its capacity, when it's maxed out, we have to open up the Inglis Main Dam. And this Inglis Main Dam, it's really our secondary discharge point from Lake Rousseau. When that Inglis bypass spillway is maxed out, we'll open up this Inglis Main Dam. We're trying to typically hold a constant water level on Lake Rousseau. And so we're matching the incoming flows, and we're sending that same amount out of Lake Rousseau. And so when the bypass spillway reaches capacity and goes beyond that, we're going to open up this Inglis Main Dam, and we're just discharging that excess water, and we're discharging it down the old Withlacoochee River channel out into the barge canal, and from there it just goes out into the Gulf of America. And so when we are releasing those excess flows out of the Inglis Main Dam downstream, they're going to flow through this about a mile of the old Withlacoochee River channel. You can see it can't connect anymore to the Lower Withlacoochee, so it enters the barge canal and then goes out into the Gulf of America. So throughout the years, the Southwest Florida Water Management District, in partnership with a lot of other groups and engineering firms and things like that, we've conducted a lot of studies to really understand the hydraulics and the hydrology of this whole Withlacoochee River system. And several of those studies focused here on the Lower Withlacoochee River. You know, we looked at those historical alterations. We looked at, well, what if we could reconnect the river? Or what if we could provide more flow to the Lower Withlacoochee River? What is the cost to do that? What would be the benefit to do that? And really, what most of our studies found was, really the only time that additional freshwater flow is available to the Lower Withlacoochee River is during those high flow times when that Inglis bypass spillway goes above its capacity. So that might be, a month out of the year, 2 months out of the year, or not at all. But when you look at the results of all those studies, really the cost benefit wasn't there. The benefits that you're going to get during those short periods of time to get a little excess flow, because the river's been dredged, and really because you have salinity issues on the Lower Withlacoochee during those dry times when really there's no additional freshwater flow available anyway. So no action's really been taken to implement any of those scenarios from those studies, because the benefit is far outweighed by the cost to do any of those alterations. And so really what we do is through all the work that we've done to understand how this river system functions and how those historical alterations have affected things, it's really given us a great level of understanding to really be able to manage the things that we manage much better. And so when we're looking just overall at the watershed and at flooding and rainfall, we have a really good grasp on what the causes and effects of that in this region are. We also, when it comes to our structure operations here, we have really good guidelines that define how we move water out of Lake Rousseau. We're sending all of it to the Lower Withlacoochee River that we can until that structure is maxed out. We also have environmental scientists that are doing an MFL study, a minimum flows and levels study right now on the Lower Withlacoochee River, and they're looking at the current conditions and what changes might impact flows and how that might affect the ecology of that system. So we're doing a lot to kind of understand this system, but really, when you get down to it, when you look at the facts and the data and the science, the data and the science do not support the need for a large-scale restoration project here on the Lower Withlacoochee River. It's actually, functioning well with the changes that have occurred. It's been highly altered, but it's actually in pretty good shape. The water quality is good, and we don't see a need for restoration because the data and the science don't point to that.